Please have your videos, everybody's videos on. So thank you for that. It's my great pleasure to welcome my colleague and friend, Heather Buchman, who is the director of orchestras at Hamilton College. I want to do this introduction because I find her to be such a fascinating person. She started out her life as a trombonist. She was the first female principal brass player in a major American orchestra with the San
Is
Diego
that
Symphony.
true?
So she was there from 88 to 96. She was even when she was younger, she was a young artist concerto competition winner with the New York Philharmonic. Later on in 1989, she was a prize winner of the ARD International Music Competition in Munich. At that point, West Germany. And she, after having that amazing career as a trombonist, I first met her when she was going through her master's in orchestral conducting at the University of Michigan, my alma mater. And then after that, she continued her conducting studies with Otto von der Müller at Juilliard. And then she did a number of things that we'll get into today in discussion. But without further ado, let's welcome Heather Buchman.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Peter. I talked to you last week. Nice to see you. Thank you, Chris.
Good to see you too.
I'm embarrassed, but flattered.
Oh. So one of the things I'm always trying to engage with our students at Cornell, not just in our conducting class, but how to engage with the arts and music, even if they're not going to be musicians. And most of our students at Cornell, 99% of the students in the orchestra and band are non-music majors. But I find them to be to give me hope about the future of classical music, because I think when I was a freelancer in Boston, I lived in a house with 5 other musicians whom all of us were from Curtis and Juilliard and Michigan, and we played in all these highway orchestras. And so the dinner conversation, unfortunately, was always a downward spiral conversation where someone would say, "Yeah, Chris, your dad was right. Classical music is going to be over in 15 years." And so when I came to Cornell, I realized that my role is to train the next generation of music supporters, not music makers. And that in fact, that's how classical music is vibrant and continues to be strong, because each one of our students in the orchestras and band and our musical community at Cornell and at Hamilton College will go on to be a major player in their community as supporters of the arts. So I'm always trying to figure out a way to highlight a way in which our students can be part of that arts and music scene as not only as participants but as supporters, but also maybe in different ways. We've had many different speakers with the orchestra this fall talking about many different paths to music, because I think when my parents thought about music, they only thought about it as playing in a professional orchestra, as you have done in the San Diego Symphony. But I think there are many pathways that students have a way to. So I'm especially curious when we have a person who's gone through a career trajectory in a very specific way in the Lockton Arts Academy, Eastman School of Music, but then you sort of switch gears. Because I think that's the kind of thing that most people are afraid of doing. They venture into the known, but they are terrified of the unknown. So they kind of stick with the known for the rest of their lives. So could you talk about that aspect of switching gears?
Well, yes, thank you, Chris. It is scary to go into the unknown. And I will also observe that one other thing that you and I have in common is having begun our lives and our careers in one century, and now are 1/5 of the way through another century. And I think there's a lot to talk about there with sort of the evolution transformation of the field of conducting and music more broadly. I think that one of the things I believe I'm noticing is that there's a blurring of the boundaries between being a musician, a professional musician or artist on one hand, or being a supporter of the arts. I kind of feel as though being a conductor, especially in a an educational setting, like you and I both are, is that we are supporters of the arts and facilitators just as much as people who maybe are doing it from the standpoint of philanthropy, perhaps, or volunteering for an arts organization. And musicians and other artists are also supporters of the arts. And what are the arts for? Um, One of the things that Chris and I were talking about in the minute before you all joined us was how the pandemic has affected, and the election has sort of informed, shaped, and is continuing to shape how we think about what we are doing, what is our purpose, and how we can be most useful to society writ broadly, but also in the most immediate sense to our students. And I think it's a two-way street. You know, when I was in my undergrad at Eastman, I know you did the Eastman undergrad thing as well. It's very much sort of receiving from your teacher, you know, being a sponge, absorbing as much as you can, and also learning from your fellow students and from the broader, you know, environment of the School of Music. Um, I feel though, now that I'm an educator, I feel that I'm getting as much from my students as hopefully I'm giving to them. In fact, I'm not entirely sure that I'm giving to them as much as I'm getting from them in terms of the learning process. I mean, to be honest, and you know what, I'm actually okay with that, because the only way we can be good teachers is to be learning from everyone, from those who are the same age, older, younger, all of that. I think the learning process here and growing and being willing to evolve, change our minds. You know, I think being humble about that and being willing to keep learning is really important. And I see you doing that with all of the great musicians and conductors you're bringing in. You're very much on that same mindset, it seems to me, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, this semester, you know, when we had to go into sort of online mode teaching, I realized I couldn't do things as normal. So that really kind of upended everything about
Yeah.
how I thought about I was going to approach music, how to share music, how to talk about music, and so in that process, I had to basically reinvent myself as uh, in a way sort of a social justice teacher about these issues. But then that came through as a result of talking to my students in the summer when they wanted to draft a BLM statement. And I realized, yeah, that's a great idea, but let's push that a little further, because I saw many organizations putting on sort of almost as a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, we better put out a statement, otherwise, you know, we'll be attacked on social media. But then it wasn't having a lot of institutional change in the way they do things. So I wasn't interested in putting on an empty statement and not really change the way we do things. So, and then through that process, we made the statement, but I also got, you know, it was a great excuse to get in touch with Aaron Flagg and Aaron Dworkin and Daniel, who we went to Michigan school
Exactly,
together
yeah,
with.
all those people.
And in talking to them, there were many conversations that I learned from and realized, oh, okay, this actually is a really critical issue that we can tackle. And we can tackle as a semester long, maybe not to solve it, but to learn more from the process. And I think the professors that I found most inspiring to me were not necessarily the ones who were imparting some great knowledge in somewhat. Although in many ways we seeked out those professors who we thought would sort of give us that content we thought would be the holy grail that, you know, is the answer key. But in fact, were the ones who kept asking questions, kept doubting where they're going, right? So in that process, they weren't finished people. They were constantly evolving and changing, and watching that was really inspiring to know that okay, I thought this person was like they had it all together, but my reaction wasn't, oh, they don't have it all together. It was one of, oh, so it's about learning. It's about progressively evolving as an artist, as a person.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought up the social justice piece, um, because clearly that's front and center in our society, and those issues have always been front and center, whether we've acknowledged them or not. And right now, classical music is undergoing a reckoning around these issues like I've never seen in the last 50
Yeah.
years around this. And I think that's really exciting. I'm finding that personally challenging because um, I'm such an orchestra girl. My love has always been the orchestra. Beethoven 5, Beethoven 9, it's like Mahler symphonies, Sibelius symphonies. It's like, that's my sort of center of gravity. You can see that's what lights me up. But all this other repertoire that is harder to access and learn about, and yet in doing so, we uncover this incredible hidden history. Uh, Florence Price, all of these incredible African American composers, and 19th and 20th and 17th century women composers. And there's such an incredible trove of music history that's just being unearthed right now. And part of the story is like, first off, that this music is really, it holds up. And why the questions of why it didn't come to light before, this very active, seeking out of music by underrepresented composers, is a very interesting and telling piece about our society. And it's something that I think uh, tells us that we need to hold ourselves accountable to um, giving everyone a chance, and checking our own bias and comfort zones and all of that. So all of this is just an incredible space for us to challenge ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, just last week, LA Opera did this whole day of deep dive into Joseph Bologne's music. They're premiering his only surviving opera, The Anonymous Lover. So the other five operas of the six is this, they're lost to time.
Mhm.
But so there's this one single opera surviving. So James Conlon gave this hour-long sort of um, uh, historical preview of the composer and the work, and I learned so many things about him. So two things I learned was that so Mozart visited Paris 3 times, and probably the third time they stayed in the same house under Marie Antoinette's sort of hosting for about 6 weeks. And Joseph Bologne's favorite medium was the Symphonie concertante, and he wrote like 10 of them. Of course, there's only like 2 surviving out of the 10. But right after Mozart left Paris, he wrote our beloved Symphony Concerto for Violin and Viola. And James Conlon compares sort of bar by bar, like, so tell me if these two sounds familiar. And I swear it was like the same piece of music. So James Conlon was surmising that maybe Mozart listened to some of the Symphonie Concerto by Joseph Bologne and said, "Hey, I like that format." So and wrote the violin viola Symphonie Concerto. And then two, which was so Joseph Bologne was tasked to commission Joseph Haydn for 6 symphonies for Marie Antoinette's court, and these are the famous Paris symphonies by Haydn. And of course, not only was he in charge of commissioning and making sure Haydn wrote the right number of musicians and all that, but he premiered them as well in Paris.
Wow.
So I mean, and then he would have been because he was basically beloved by the court, and he was appointed as the music director of the Paris Opera. But of course, there was an intrigue. James Collins surmises that it was probably somebody who actually wanted that job that sort of sabotaged Joseph Boulogne sort of ability to be the head of the Paris Opera. So, I mean, it just boggles my mind,
Yeah.
not only the
Wow.
amount of music that he wrote, and then we lost, but then the effect on sort of our canon composers that he had, Mozart and Haydn. So it's not so, the argument that is often brought up by people is time will sift the repertoire, right? Well, okay, but if there's a racism and intentional effort to stamp out somebody's music because there's a mulatto or it's a woman composer, then no, it
Right.
is not
Exactly.
okay to say time masterworks survives the test of time. Yeah. Okay, I'm talking too much, but I really want to get to your point of advocacy because I didn't realize you had founded the Society for New Music in Syracuse.
Oh no,
So,
I'm sorry. I didn't found it.
oh, okay.
But I'm currently so let's see, where are you going with this?
Well, I want to talk about your advocacy of contemporary music because often, in the conducting class, we've already talked about the effect of memorization, right? Because that causes some conductors to stay on a very narrow repertoire path, excluding not only BIPOC and women composers, but oftentimes contemporary music and favoring sort of, oh, I'm an opera specialist and just focusing on certain repertoire, certain canon of repertoire. But I love that you are constantly exploring ways to not only explore new music and contemporary music, but also making headways into talking with dancers and scholars and how to present music. So if you could talk about the way you advocate for contemporary music and for the other arts by involving them with orchestral music.
Okay. Well, just collecting my thoughts where to start with this. Chris, you started at Cornell a couple of years after I did.
2004.
Started, yes. I started Hamilton at 2001, and we are in one ways, Ithaca is its own cultural center of gravity for sure. And in another way, we're both sort of in this radius around central New York, Syracuse. And so there's a strong connection between both where I am and where you are and the musicians based in Syracuse. So the Society for New Music was actually founded 9 years ago by a wonderful new music specializing soprano whose husband happened to get a job teaching in religious studies at Syracuse University. And Neva Pilgrim is the singer's name. When they got to Syracuse, I mean, she had been working with Luciano Berio, Della Piccola, like wow. Everybody, Stockhausen. She was on a first name basis with all these people. They were like her go-to soprano, sort of like Jan de Gaetani. Yeah. Anyway, so her husband gets a job in Syracuse and they look around and think, well, if there's going to be any kind of new music scene here, I guess we're going to have to start it. And it's 49 years later. And so the wonderful thing about that organization, like as a model for how the arts can function in a region that's like outside of an area like New York or Boston or Chicago or LA, where people are a little bit more dispersed. The population density is a lot different than being on either of the coasts. So this organization really kind of acts as a hub that brings together people from as far west as Rochester, as far east as where I am, as far south as Ithaca, as far north as Potsdam. And so it brings together these musicians who otherwise might never have occasion to work together just because we're so geographically distant. So I think that's really a wonderful thing. Again, I think Ithaca is kind of um, in its own category in being sort of a very high arts, and you know with all the universities there, there's a critical mass there. I don't know how you feel about that, but Rochester also has its own critical mass because of
Mhm.
Eastman and University of Rochester. But for everyone else, the idea of being able to connect with people who don't live in the same town as you and to come together and collaborate. This particular organization focuses on performing the music of composers in New York State.
Yeah.
And the state of New York covers a um, good chunk of centers of art and education. So between like all the schools in New York City, obviously, all the way west to Buffalo and Fredonia. It's a pretty nice state to focus on the arts and music in. And one of the things that the society does is have an annual composition prize for residents of New York State who are 30 and under. And so that's the Brian Israel composition prize. We always send the notification to Cornell and like to every
Mhm.
school with a music department or a school of music.
Yeah.
And again, we get really wonderful entries, and invariably the folks who make the short list or win that prize go on to have like really great careers. So it's fun to be a judge on that panel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like these, like Nico Muli, or like any number of people have like Derek Bermel.
Yep.
It's like, so that's kind of a privilege to be in a position to like encourage people coming up.
Yeah.
But we also do one program every year that brings composers together with choreographers and dancers.
Great.
That program is called Vision of Sound. That happens every February.
Mhm.
And basically, I love seeing a dance paired with music because the dancers make the music
Yeah.
in a way that, I mean, I've always loved watching an orchestra play because you can see the visual of
Yeah.
the strings blowing, and like the conductor sort of makes the music visible, but
Mhm.
dance really makes the music visible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So on the opera side, because of our founders' strong vocal, orientation, and interest in creating new opera. We've had various commissions over the years that have had to do with history, particularly New York State history or local history. Like in 2011, we premiered an opera by a woman composer, Persis Vehar, on Eleanor Roosevelt,
Wow.
who of course was a New Yorker.
Yeah.
And it was really, it didn't concern her time in the White House at all. It was like her life before and
Mhm.
after the White House. So FDR was kind of over here. So it was really about the shaping of her, finding her own voice and her own strength and resolve. So that was amazing. It felt like this whole, women's empowerment kind of piece. It was really, but then the next project that we took on was, again, with the same composer, actually, Persis Vehar, and it was about a 19th century women's suffrage leader named Jocelyn Gage. Now, we all should have learned her name, coming up the pipes when we got the chapter on, the history of women's suffrage with Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Of course, that history is right up here
Yeah.
in Rochester and Seneca Falls. Well, Matilda Jocelyn Gage lived in Fayetteville.
Wow.
And she was slightly younger than those two, but they all three met at the 1853 Women's Rights Convention, which happened in Syracuse.
Yeah.
And Matilda just read about this conference in the newspaper, showed up at the convention, 26 years old, gave her first ever public address, like knocked it out of the park. And so Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton immediately like found her, and they worked together for 38 years.
Wow.
Um, and none of them lived to see the passage of the 19th Amendment, tragically.
Mm.
But Matilda Joslyn Gage was really, she was, she lived on the Erie Canal, and she, like Frederick Douglass, visited her house as she was a kid growing up.
Mm.
She made friends with various members of the Haudenosaunee and learned from them about how superior their society was to ours in terms of gender equity.
Mm.
And so that very much informed her thinking.
Mm.
Um, in fact, she was a little too progressive for her two colleagues to stomach. And so she was literally pushed aside. That's the name of the opera.
Mm.
But you can draw a direct line from the book that Matilda Joslyn Gage wrote, Women, Church and State, draw a direct line from that to Gloria Steinem.
Wow.
And everything that she wrote about in the 1800s, it's like, okay, well, that doesn't sound radical to me. It just makes sense.
Right.
So, I mean, it's all like filling in these gaps in our knowledge. And that's one of the cool things that art can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a prism to what should be not only profound, but sort of catalyst to our larger society. Because I think sometimes the mainstream can always be about surviving, about making money, about sort of paying rent. But arts.
Oh, one more postscript
Please.
on this. This is like Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. The premiere performance of that opera, Pushed Aside, on Matilda Joslyn Gage, was January 21st, 2017. Now think about that. That was the day after Donald Trump's inauguration.
Oh,
it was the day of the Women's March.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, could not possibly have been planned.
Yeah.
But it had a completely different resonance.
Yeah, of course.
Than it would otherwise have had. So I don't know. It's like I feel like Forrest Gump a little bit, It's like.
So I want to kind of zone in to the dance and music aspect.
Yeah.
I know you, when you took a sabbatical, you took a year of ballet. Is that correct?
I took a ballet class over Zoom this morning. In fact,
Wow. So
I continue to flail in ballet.
So, I mean, I totally agree with you about dance and music, because not only from doing Nutcracker many times, but when I was a student in Michigan, we had this project where the Merce Cunningham Dance Company was coming. And so they were bringing the person for the John Cage Trust. And so the UMS sort of brought this person to work with the School of Music, and no one at the School of Music knew what to do with her. So at that point, I was part of a new music collective called Brave New Works. And so they had kicked it down to all the professors. Nobody could figure out what to do with this person. And then someone suggested, well, why don't you give it to the student new music group? So there came a task to do something with this person. And I couldn't figure out anything except, well, okay, then what I'll do is we will create a project called 5 Dances, and we'll commission composers and choreographers, dancers, and instrumentalists to collaborate. But instead of doing like what John Cage and Merce Cunningham did, which was minimal collaboration, meaning they just agreed on the timing of the movement, and then they went away and worked. And then they just brought it together at the performance. We said, okay, so we're going to do the opposite of that. We're going to do, from the very beginning, composers write a piece that's not finished, choreographers, dancers, instrumentalists rehearse and shape the piece. So the final product has a equal input from composer, instrumentalist, dancer, choreographer. Mm-hmm. And it was the most exciting project ever. So we would spend like Saturdays for like 5 Saturdays in a row. And so the rule to the composers was, you can't complete the piece. You can come up with the set of rules for us to play with. But that aspect of joining hands in that creative process was, I wish we could do more of. But because in some ways, Nutcracker is very separate. dancers and choreographers, they did their thing, orchestra does their thing, and
Hmm.
Tchaikovsky, of course, had written the music already out. So in terms of occupying the space and realizing the composition, yes, there is a nutcracker that the audience gets to see. But I think there's much more interesting things happen when dancers, choreographers, instrumentalists, musicians, composers work together to create something. Um, but this is a long way of asking how you incorporate what you learn in ballet into your music making.
Okay. That's a great question. And um, uh, I'm just taking a moment to think um, where to start with that, because I could talk for an hour about just that. Um,
Now, mind you, I've been telling our students that conducting is not ballet. Because in the sense that not like Seiji Ozawa, where he has a set routine for the piece, and then he repeats that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday into the Sunday performance. But it's
mhm.
more of a reactive. You listen to what the orchestra is doing, and then realize, okay, I need tool number 67 in this moment. Oh, I need tool number 246 in this moment. So that it's a constant engagement of reacting to what the orchestra is needing and providing. And so it's sort of that constant re-engagement and reaction to what the orchestra is producing and then putting out another tool. So
Right.
that's what we've been telling, I've been telling the students.
Okay. So you're saying that he does not like
Well,
have, I
actually,
mean, is this
I disagree with the Boston Symphony sort of take on Ozawa, because I've spoken to maybe four musicians who say whose main complaint was that, yeah, once we see what he does on Tuesday, that's pretty much what we get for the rest of the week.
mm,
Although at Tango, I've seen some amazing things he's done with the orchestra, where yeah, I mean, I could talk a whole bunch about my yeah, basically, like he's an amazing um, um, depth and repertoire of gestures, and he's the most physically talented conductor I've ever witnessed. Um, I think even to the level of Carlos Kleiber. But I think the criticism that he often got from Boston Symphony was that, yeah, I mean, we kind of see the same thing. Once he finds something that works, then it's sort of
gesturally?
gesturally the
I
same.
see. Okay. Okay. So I spent one of my leaves doing focusing on the study of ballet, because I saw it as a way to add some things to my um, sort of physical, what shall I say, not toolbox in that sense that you're talking about, Chris, but to my physical being and presence that I felt that I needed to work on. And I'm coming at this from the sort of my past mindset as musician, instrumental musician, as an athlete
Mhm,
who's like in training,
mhm,
and that it's a very much of a physical training. It's just, the specific physical skills.
mhm,
Um, conducting, the physicality of conducting is really obvious, right? But it's not just the gestural, stuff in the hands. It's really a whole body thing, and um, this may connect back to our study with Ken Kiesler, where he would make us conduct without our hands,
right.
and, but actually, sometimes I do that, like not, uh, not as an exercise, but just it's how you hold yourself. It's like how you understand your body as an instrument of expression.
Mhm,
Um, and yes, hands are important for sure. And studying ballet, the expression in ballet dancers' hands is incredible. Like the grace and use of curves and lines, all of that stuff's very useful. In fact, I know. a lot of conductors study ballet specifically for these things.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I know
I
you and I both work with Joe Gifford. So
right.
if so, Joe Gifford, do you want to talk about Joe Gifford a little bit?
Well, Joe, now was he? His background was modern dance, but
Modern
he
dance, right, right.
yes, but he came up with his own particular combination of the dance background plus things like Alexander technique.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm
Also,
forgetting the other.
nonverbal acting. He taught at
Right.
the Boston University for a long time, working with actors. But then Phyllis Curtin at Tanglewood sort of saw his work with some of her vocal students who were taking his acting class, the nonverbal acting class, and then brought him to Tanglewood to work with the vocal program at
Right.
Tanglewood. Yeah.
And that the name I was trying to think of was Feldenkrais, like his
Right.
exercises had
Yeah.
there, and then there was one other school of tech of um, physical training that he
Mhm.
brought to it. But the gestalt of all of this is just like learning how we can use our bodies to be sort of physically effective, expressive, and conveyors of energy and affect and intention.
Right. The
So
phrase
that's
we
like that we are the instruments.
Right. He always said less is more, and we're the vessel of the music. So,
I
um,
think we get the less is more piece as we get older too.
yeah,
Not because we like our batteries run down, but just we realize it's more effective. It's like getting rid
yeah,
of the
exactly.
noise.
Right.
Yeah. But one other thing about ballet is they have to work dancers like in all dance. You're working with the breath.
Yeah.
And that is crucial to music. I think of dance, especially ballet, but all dance as being really just the flip side of music. And the other piece of this is rhythm
Hmm.
and getting rhythm, getting dance into our bodies. Music, not all music is dance, but music needs to dance.
Yeah.
So understanding that more intimately from the inside is really important.
I just remember Joe Joe Gifford always telling us, conducting students, that if you don't breathe, then there won't be any way to go forward start the movement or start the music. So and as a wind player, I really connected with that. So oftentimes when I see conductors who are either pianists or string players, sometimes they are focused on doing the music rather than
Mhm.
really uh, capturing the music and breathing in and then releasing. That sort of that act of inhale, exhale, right? It it's such a necessary way for us to begin the process. But if we don't, you know, as many conducting pedagogues have said, the upbeat has to show everything: the character, the tempo, the intent, and I think using the breath really helps that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm learning that in a big way with my pandemic adaptations just as recently as this last week. By the way, can I cut away to ask about the what instruments your students play in your class?
Please, everybody, can you chime in with your instruments?
Yeah, I play violin, flute,
Okay.
Tuba.
Okay. And
Piano.
Jeff, I know play. I'm sorry, Alec.
Alec plays tuba.
Okay. Okay.
Peter,
Percussion.
Got that. Yeah.
DJ,
Piano.
Andrea.
Violin.
Okay, did I get that right? 2 wind players and 4 non-wind. A violin, percussion, piano, and
Flute.
anyway.
Amy plays flute.
Okay. Well, no matter what instrument we play, every musician breathes, right? It's just that, is that for a wind instrument, The breath is physically, you're not getting nothing unless you breathe. You literally can't, whereas it's theoretically possible to play any of the other instruments without breathing, but it won't be music. What happened in the last couple of weeks at Hamilton was that we had a small number of cases that promptly got squelched. We've had a total of 10 on campus this semester, and that's kind of waned, but there was like we went for a long time with no cases, like for 2 months. And then there were some cases, and then there were a few cases, and everyone kind of freaked out and kind of locked down a little bit to sort of, the students had just been told they could walk into the village, and there was like, nope, sorry, can't do that. So part of what I did in response to that was to break down my brass ensemble from one large group, 16 players that I conducted, into thinking, you know what, we're going to de-densify even further and do quintets. And I'm going to not be the conductor anymore. I'm going to revert to like a chamber music coach. And so, and that draws on one aspect of being an ensemble conductor, that of being a coach, completely separate from the physical, conducting technique. And part of that transition meant that I wasn't going to start them, that they were going to need to start themselves. Right. Yeah. And that's definitely a skill that unless you do a lot of chamber music, people aren't generally comfortable doing, I find. So that's something I thought, this is a great opportunity for us to really focus on this. Like, I'm not starting you. Yeah. Figure out how to start. And how do you start? With the breath. Yeah. This applies to piano. This applies to percussion. Especially for violin. Like if you're the principal second or the concertmaster, and you're running the rehearsal, so these things don't just apply to conducting, it applies to music. And I think there are probably ways in which we can extend this beyond music and beyond the arts. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite thing to do with the chamber orchestra was to always have a piece that's done without conductor, because I realized for a number of years I was getting into this mode of giving every single thing, right? So that it became a visual event rather than an audible event. So the music making was all about watching Chris's cues. And so once I started having pieces that was done without conductor, then I had to go into this coaching mode where I'm no longer giving the information, and I'm coaching people how to cue people in, how to breathe, how to play together, how to listen across for musical things. So when we started doing that, I realized, oh, hey, guess what? That transfers to pieces that is also conducted. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but the listening piece is in this environment that we're in right now. I think we all know this. It's become quite a bit more challenging because I don't know if you guys are doing 6 feet apart, or you were saying to me over the summer, more like 12 feet apart.
Well, I mean, there is no wind playing and singing allowed indoors right now at Cornell. So they're being quite restrictive. So the band actually rehearsed out in the quads until with the heaters on, but there came a point in October where it was too cold to do so. So they gave a performance in October 17, and then they're now completely in online mode. And the orchestra has been in online mode. I've kind of pushed really students to play chamber music and take lessons. But in terms of performative experience, our orchestra has access to none for this fall. Yeah, I'm hoping that'll change in the spring. But yeah, Rachel, you have a hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had a question just going back to sort of the body movement. I've always been like a super stiff and kind of I don't feel natural when I'm moving. And I did a lot of chamber music and back in high school, and I would have to, breathe to sort of lead all of the rest of the chamber students in. And one thing I found was I was focusing a lot on how I thought people interpreted my movements, and then that would kind of lock me up, and I would get really stiff even more. And so one of the things that I learned was just do what I think is natural, and I'm a human, other people are humans, so everyone will kind of understand what I'm trying to do. And so my question was, were you always a person who was comfortable with movement, and what were some key things that you learned in trying to be more natural and fluid?
Well, thank you for that question. I am not a natural mover at all, at all. So I completely relate to what you're talking about. And whereas for me, getting on the trombone orchestra track was very straightforward, and I was very, very fortunate. Conducting for me has been very much the opposite experience. So I consider myself very much still working on this. And it's been 97. Okay, it's been going, between 20 and 30 years now. So I guess what I would say is to that we are all like, we all have this physical sort of animal nature, which is to say, we're all embodied, and part of the process of living is learning how to be in our bodies, and that's a lifetime, not to say that you're never going to get there until until the end, but just it's a process, because the body's always changing too, so wherever a person is, like at a point in time, and is your relationship to your body and learning to use it, and everyone's different. I'm someone who has long arms. I was a natural swimmer, I like good long swimming arms. So when I use my full wingspan as a conductor, I look like I'm flying. It's not so good. So for me, that's something I've had to keep reminding myself about, continue to remind myself about. What other things? Depending on on your build, and in general, I know that there's a spectrum here, and it's not like a binary male female type, but to the extent that in general women's center of gravity is lower than men's, that affects our technique, that our sort of muscle development up here. All of that's going to mean that some things are easier for us naturally, expressively, and some things are going to be more difficult. And for everyone, that's unique. And so learning what those things are for you, what are your natural strengths, and what are the things that you can work on. You can always make your strengths stronger and shore up the things that are not strong yet. So that's just a process. So I take it, is the conducting class completely on remote?
It is, yeah.
Okay. And are you working on technique, serving one another?
We are, yeah.
Okay. Well, you all look totally different, I'm sure.
I mean, I totally agree with you. One of the things that was really difficult for me when I was with Ken Kiesler was that there was such a systematic way he was teaching the technique, and I look totally different than him. So I felt like, okay, that is working because he has this shape and I don't look like you, so that doesn't work for me. Even the baton haul that I was insisting on, right?
Yeah.
That he's got a baton is the extension of your arm. You have the straight line. Well, okay, look what I just did. This is my natural hand position, right? But in order to make that straight, I have to do that. And so I had pain here for years. And so, and then like, yeah, I met Johannes Schleifli after Michigan, and he was looking at my baton and I was like, why is there's so much tension here. So, well, it has to be straight. I was taught straight, extension of the arm. So he's like, well, why don't you put the baton like this? That way you don't have, oh, what? So, I think conducting is everybody's body is different. Everybody's hands are different. So you have to really figure out your own sort of way of adopting a particular technique that fits your body, that works for you. And I think the kind of teaching that I wished I would be more naturally fall to, because it's hard for me because I was trained by Ken. So my natural sort of default teaching mode is like teaching Ken's technique, and I have to constantly remind myself. And I made a lot more mistakes when I was a younger teacher, where I would sort of just try to teach Ken's method. But what I had to do was kind of step back and say, okay, what is this person? What does this person look like? Who is this person? And then try to figure out a way to work with what the students are bringing, whether it's strength or weaknesses. And I think that's the kind of reflecting teaching that is often missing in, and this is my little pet peeve about music teachers, if you can produce one Joshua Bell out of 1,000 students, then they're defined as a success, even if they fail with 999 students, because what they'll insist on is this square box method with every student. And if the student can't fit into that, well, you don't have talent, or you're a failure, and then they're sort of pushed aside. So, and because our conservatory, our sort of teacher training system kind of values this sort of famous teacher model, the teacher who is really reflective and says, okay, let's figure out who this person is. That kind of thinking is not done in every level, especially early on in our training. That's why so many students quit, because, that was my experience. I was a cellist for 5 years, stuck on Suzuki Book 3, being told daily in my lessons that I don't have what it takes to be a cellist. And then I moved to the US, and then I met my oboe teacher. And then within a month, I progressed more than 5 years on cello. And I realized, oh, okay, I just had a bad teacher. So I think this way of looking at our set skills, who we are and what we have. So if a person, and this is why I so admire you taking ballet during your sabbatical, because you are reflective enough to realize, okay, that's the area I need work on, and you go there. But most at least most conductors that I met are not this reflective. They tend to sort of go to their normative strength. If somehow they realize, hey, I'm a Mahler specialist, and they go all in on Mahler, and rather than sort of, okay, I'm on the mic.
No, actually, I've been thinking more about Rachel's question, because I'd be curious to see a show of hands here. Who in the class does not have any physical tension, or like places where they store stress in their bodies? Anyone? Gee, okay. I'm improvising here, Chris. Hang on just a moment. This is on my dresser, directly behind me, my little nubby ball. And this is, well, I initially got one of these from Dance Skin. They like the Dance Skin store just off of Columbus Circle in New York City, but they're like $5 or $6 on Amazon. And from my trombone years, I have way more tension on this side. Women get this a lot. Yeah, exactly. It's like holding up this thing and just like being locked in this position. Those of us who play asymmetrical instruments are going, the asymmetricality of playing, especially something like the violin or the viola, those are extremely asymmetrical positions that we're putting ourselves in hour after hour, day after week after month after year, and it accumulates over time. So I think everyone has issues with neck and shoulder tension, especially living through what this crazy 2020, pandemic, election, everything else that's going on in the world. Of course, we're building up tension. So learning how to actually physically take care of, our animal aspects of the bodies to try to resolve as much of that as possible. It'll help us as conductors. It'll help us just get through life better as animals, just seeking to survive and thrive. So learning how to take care of the physical instrument. And that's one thing about ballet, is that they're working everything on both sides of the body so that it's as symmetrical as possible. We need to be able to communicate with the right side of our bodies, the left side of our bodies, and there needs to be a sense of poise and carriage, which is really just about proper spinal alignment and support. All of which just helps us direct energy more efficiently. Does that help address?
Yeah, I thought what was really interesting was how you mentioned, I mean, we are animals. And so I think sometimes I tend to neglect the physical side of my body just because I'm not really tuned to that. But I think I should be paying a lot more attention to that. Yeah.
For sure. Well, if you've got like a pet, like a dog or a cat, they're probably super good at being a dog or a cat. You know what I mean? They're very natural, and we can be too. It might take us a little bit longer because we're on our screens.
Yeah. All right. So if you have more questions, please use the raise your hand feature. I know I'm trying to go to some sort of hybrid mode in the spring, and of course that depends on many different factors. And so with the restrictions I have, I'm trying to come up with a set of repertoire because my plan is to have non-wind and brass repertoire and at least one or two pieces. My hope is that we can do Florence Price's Fourth Symphony, which I've been planning for a long time. But I cannot involve the wind players until when it's warm enough for us to be out in the quad, because they're not allowing us to do any indoor playing. So we have some, Paul, our jazz guy, are working on this sort of plan to expand the Dante program. So the jazz combos have been rehearsing with 3 rooms connected by intranet and using a system called Dante. So we're going to try to expand that to 16 rooms so that the wind players can be in separate rooms. And I'm hoping that facilities will clear wind playing as long as they're inside rooms without anybody else. So we're going to try to connect 16 rooms for the wind players to be in, and then the string section will be in B20, so that we'll be connecting those 16 rooms and rehearsing in that way. And apparently Edwin Atwater has been doing that at San Francisco Conservatory as well. So we're trying to work out some kind of way to be able to make music together. But how are you responding to not only Hamilton, but in other ways in terms of, because I know when we had Lawrence Lowe here last week, he talked about Buffalo Philharmonic having socially distanced, plexiglass separated situation.
Right.
And we talked quite a bit about how different it was to make music because everything, it's like conducting a Russian orchestra. Apparently, everything is late, and so my computer just clapped down. Yeah. So how? Sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, Chris, this is one way in which our institutions are different. You're at a large university with a strong medical division there that the administration is taking the lead from them,
Right.
and they're setting a very hard line
Yeah.
about that. At Hamilton, we had no guidance at all. We had to come up with our own stuff. And like, basically I wrote the music protocol and gave it to the administration, and they basically incorporated it into our COVID safety protocols, which is, at least I got to do that. But like, what guidance were we going to use? It was ultimately that UC Boulder study. You and I served on that ad hoc committee for from the College Orchestra Directors Association. So basically, when they released their second round of results from August 6th, we had a brand new choir director joining us this year too. And of course, it's like, all of the choir directors, basically, you're not going to have any choral music for 2 years, period.
Yeah.
Well, since then, there's been this incredible like swelling of creativity around like singers' masks, and she tried out all these different singers' masks. One of the huge issues that was raised in the result of the UC Boulder study was knowing the ventilation characteristics of the spaces you're rehearsing in. So, and that wind players were going to need to play with masks. They did not say no wind playing. They said play with masks and bell covers. And so here it was the middle of August. And it was like, what? Bell covers? What even are those? And where am I going to get them? So then you see people, and what about the flute players? Well, I found a video on YouTube of a high school band director in our area who like designed her own mask, and it looks like a horse feed bag. Like a horse feed bag with a hole in the side for the head joint to go in. But what it does is it actually gives a little extra space for the wind to go over the tone hole. And actually it sort of works.
Okay.
I can send you the video.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Bell covers? Okay, got one right here for you. Trombone, bell cover, doubles as a shower cap. But who made this for me? It was actually my ballet teacher had a seamstress friend who made costumes for her, is completely out of work. Now is transitioned to just making music PPE. So you put
Can you
this
give me
on.
a link to her contact? Because I'll order a whole set for our brass players. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, I think it's really tragic. And yes, I rehearsed outside as much as possible. We gave a porch concert at the end of September, and we were not allowed to advertise it at all. But like, it was during one of the other Indian summer that we had at the end of September. It was like in the upper 70s. Kids were out in their tank tops, like around this picnic pavilion, hanging out and it was a completely different experience than performing in our concert hall. It was lovely, and I would do it again, pandemic or not. But yes, I'll hook you. It is possible. The recommendation 6 by 6 feet distance, except for trombones, the trombone distance is 6 feet by 9 feet to make room for the slide.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, so the trombone distance is the more conservative distance. And would you feel more comfortable with someone playing a trumpet behind you, 6 feet behind you, or 9 feet? So we argued to our people that it's the side to side distance of 6 feet is fine, but just to add an extra layer of protection by that extra yard of space. So I don't know if you have any influence to.
Well, I brought the CODA sort of recommendation to our facilities, and they sort of said no. There was just outright rejection. They were so afraid of any liability issue because
of course
they didn't want to. Nobody wanted to be the person that approved it because they didn't want to be traced back to the person who approved the protocols. That would have caused a super spreader event. So then it was just, it was really pulling teeth. And I'm really frustrated about even Bailey Hall. We completely lost access to Bailey Hall as a performance venue. So the only option
I
that
bet
is
it's a
written-
classroom now, right?
Yeah, so it's a
Right.
sort of go-to classroom space for any large-size classes that they need to social distance.
Mhm.
But as a performance venue, it's just been locked out for the music department.
I'm sorry. I can send you my document, and if you want to share that with anyone.
Yeah, I
see-
mean, one
see
of the
what-
things that I'm going to try this time, hopefully, is that I'm going to have examples like Hamilton and other
Mhm.
institutions who have safely practiced protocols. And so I'll go to them, the facilities, and okay, these are the 25, 40 institutions who are following these protocols successfully. So
Yeah.
perhaps that'll have a little more teeth.
We're totally in a necessity is the mother of invention situation, which is sort of the silver lining of all of this, and that it's forcing us to do some different things. I've got my woodwind section playing the Beethoven octet,
Great.
and I didn't know that piece at all. But it's like, wow, this is actually a great piece of music.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, it's forcing us out of our grooves in a way.
Yeah.
And who know that we were all inhaling each other's aerosols before COVID-19 came along.
Well, I knew
Yeah.
because I got sick every winter. I got the flu every winter.
Well, I didn't really think about it, but anyway, it's going to be interesting to see just how all this like sifts out.
Yeah. All right. So, any more questions from our students?
I have a question for them.
Yeah.
How are you all doing, and how are you in terms of like music and the conducting class, and what strikes you, what's important to you guys, how is this filtering through your experience this semester?
I guess one major problem that I faced in all the classes I'm taking through the music department is latency. So
Yeah.
whenever I'm hearing something or like doing something, it's always late. And at first it was just a little, annoying, but then it's just really hard because especially the sound quality is not the same either. And so it's just hard with the latency. That's one issue I've been having.
Right. What are you trying to do in terms of that, where the latency comes up? Are you trying to play duets or?
Not performing, but when we're, for example, in this class, when I'm conducting for, this class, it's just like the music is behind, or I don't even know, but it's just not connected correctly. So, yeah.
Yeah. We were planning to. Where's my computer? Hang on. Can you guys see it? Because my screen's frozen. What's happening? Hang on. Can I?
Chris.
I may have to transfer my hosting to somebody else and log back in. Thanks. Hang on.
Is it Chris that's having the connection issues, or?
I believe so.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, I guess we can still at least talk a little bit to your question. I guess he's trying to leave and come back.
Yeah. For me, I've been extremely lucky